We're talking about something that gets misunderstood all the time. People think that to destroy a narcissist, you have to become like them, loud, aggressive, vindictive. But that's not how a super empath does it. See, a super empath doesn't fight with fire. They fight with truth. They destroy the illusion, not the person. And that is more devastating than any argument ever could be. I want you to sit with this for a second. Awareness is the turning point. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it changes everything. Most people who get caught up with a narcissist don't realize it's happening at first. They're drawn in by charm, by charisma, by what seems like confidence. And that's not a flaw in the empath. That's the nature of manipulation. Narcissists don't come with warning labels. They come wrapped in attention, praise, validation, until they don't, until the shift happens, until it feels like love turned cold. And the empath, because of their high emotional intelligence, their tendency to give the benefit of the doubt, will try to understand it. They'll try harder. They'll take responsibility for the tension. They'll ask, what did I do wrong? Not realizing that's exactly what the narcissist wants. But let's slow this down, because here's where everything starts to change. There comes a moment, usually small, quiet, sometimes in the middle of the night, when the empath starts asking different questions. Not what did I do wrong, but why does this always feel like it's my fault, even when it isn't? Not how do I fix this, but why am I the only one trying to fix this? That's not just introspection, that's awareness. That's the first crack in the narcissist's illusion. And once that awareness opens up, it doesn't close again. See, narcissists build their power on control and confusion. If they can keep you questioning yourself, you'll stay in the cycle. If they can keep you thinking their mistreatment is somehow justified, you won't leave. But once you see the cycle, once you name the gaslighting, the blame shifting, the silent treatment, it's like a light turns on in a dark room, and what you used to call passion or tension or ups and downs, you now see clearly as manipulation. That is the most powerful moment in an empath's journey, because it's not about confrontation. It's not about screaming, you're a narcissist across the room. It's about standing still, standing strong, and saying to yourself, this isn't love, this is control, and I'm not playing this game anymore. That clarity, it destroys the narcissist strategy, because their behavior only works when you don't see it for what it is. The gaslighting only works when you're questioning your reality. The guilt trips only work when you're still carrying their emotional weight. But when you stop carrying it, when you say, no, that's not mine, you're taking your power back quietly, completely. Let me tell you something. A narcissist doesn't fear yelling or accusations or even exposure. What they fear is the moment you stop being confused, the moment you stop reacting, the moment you see the pattern clearly and choose not to participate anymore. That's awareness, and it's not emotional, it's tactical. Think about it like this. You're in a fog, walking through a forest. The narcissist is the one holding the flashlight. They shine it where they want you to go, make you think it's your path. And for a while, you follow, because it feels like the only way. But one day, you realize you have your own light. You flick it on, and you see the full picture, the detours, the traps, the way they led you in circles. Once you have that awareness, why would you keep walking their path? And here's the most important part. Awareness doesn't mean you're immune to pain. It doesn't mean the relationship suddenly stops hurting, but it does mean you're no longer under the illusion. You can feel grief, sadness, disappointment, and still move forward with your eyes open. That's strength, because you're not stuck anymore. You're not trying to decode mixed messages. You're not over-apologizing. You're not begging for breadcrumbs of affection. You're observing. You're grounded. You're seeing manipulation in real time and calmly saying, nope, not today. And let me be clear, this doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. When you wake up to the reality of a narcissistic dynamic, you begin to see what you've always deserved: peace, mutual respect, emotional safety, and you realize you never had that with them. Not consistently, not truly. That realization hurts, but it also heals, because it points you back to yourself. Awareness puts the focus back where it belongs, not on fixing the narcissist, but on freeing yourself. You begin to remember your worth, not because someone tells you, but because you start to feel it again. You look back at all the emotional gymnastics you did trying to earn approval, and you realize how exhausting it was and unnecessary. And the narcissist, they feel that shift. They sense the distance. They try to pull you back, maybe with kindness, maybe with cruelty, but it doesn't work the same way anymore because you've seen the pattern, you've studied the script, and now you know your lines and you choose to rewrite them. Awareness is the first step, but it's not small. It's not passive. It's the moment you go from reacting to responding, from surviving to deciding. You don't need to yell. You don't need to win the argument. You don't need to prove anything to them. You just need to see. Because once you see, you can't unsee. And once you can't unsee, you're already walking away. Even if your body is still there, your mind and your spirit are already moving forward. And eventually the rest of you catches up. So if you're there right now, if you're in that place where something doesn't sit right, where something feels off, where you're questioning everything, don't rush past it. Lean into that awareness. Let it guide you. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And I promise you, when you step into it fully, you'll never go back. There comes a point in every unhealthy relationship where you stop trying to change them and you start choosing yourself. That's detachment. And it's powerful. Not loud, not dramatic, but powerful. Let's get one thing straight. Detachment is not about shutting down. It's not cold. It's not cruel. It's clear. And clarity in a toxic relationship is everything. A narcissist thrives when you stay emotionally engaged. They need your reactions to feel powerful. Your anger, your tears, your frustration, that's fuel for them. They don't care if it's positive or negative. Attention is attention. As long as you're reacting, they still matter. They're still in control. But detachment, that's when you stop giving them that access. It's when you emotionally step back from the roller coaster. You stop chasing apologies they never mean. You stop defending yourself to someone who's already decided you're the villain in their story. You stop dancing to the rhythm they set, and you start walking to your own. Let me put it simply. Detachment is the art of not participating in someone else's dysfunction, and it doesn't happen overnight. It usually begins with small shifts. Maybe you stop explaining every little thing. Maybe you stop replying to every provocation. Maybe you stop rushing to fix their mood every time they spiral. At first, it might feel strange. You're used to being the one who smooths things over, who keeps the peace, who absorbs the tension. But eventually you realize that's not your job. That was never your job. See, the empath's default response is to care deeply, to connect emotionally. But when that care is constantly weaponized against you, when your empathy becomes a tool they use to keep you small, something has to change. Not because you're becoming heartless, but because you're becoming wise. Detachment is not indifference. It's self-protection, and not in a reactive, defensive way, in a grounded, deliberate way. It's saying, I love you, but I will not lose myself in the process of loving you. And when you detach from a narcissist, you're doing something radical. You're removing their ability to pull the strings. You're reclaiming your emotional energy. They might escalate, try to provoke you, test you, push harder, because without your reaction, they start to lose their grip. But the key is to hold steady. You don't have to match their chaos with your calm. You just have to stay calm. Let them throw the tantrum. Let them play the victim. Let them poke and prod, waiting for a spark. Your job is to not light the match, because the narcissist isn't afraid of your anger. They're afraid of your peace. When you're calm, they can't manipulate you. When you're steady, they can't control you. And when you're detached, they can't reach you in the same way. You're no longer on the hook for their emotional storms. And here's what's really important. Detachment isn't something you announce. You don't need to declare it. You don't need to text them a paragraph about how you're emotionally distancing. That's still engaging. That's still reacting. And often it leads right back into the cycle. Real detachment is quiet. It's internal. It's a shift that happens deep inside you, where once you might have jumped to defend yourself, now you stay silent. Where once you might have pleaded to be understood, now you simply understand yourself. Where once you might have bent over backward to meet their needs, now you return that energy inward. And maybe they notice. Maybe they say things like, you've changed, or why are you being distant? And you know what? They're right. You have changed because you've stopped participating in the emotional theater. You've stopped playing your role in their script. You've stepped outside the performance and remembered who you are when you're not being constantly evaluated. This is where the healing starts to get real, because detachment creates space, and in that space, you begin to hear your own voice again. You remember what it feels like to breathe without tension, to rest without fear, to feel peace without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Detachment gives you that room, and it doesn't mean you stop caring completely. It just means you stop carrying what isn't yours. Let me give you an example. Let's say the narcissist gives you the silent treatment. Before you'd chase, you'd apologize, even if you didn't know what you were apologizing for. You'd feel anxiety creeping in, the need to fix it. But now, with detachment, you let them be silent. You don't chase. You recognize that silence as a tactic, not a reflection of your worth. You don't internalize it. You go on with your day. That's a powerful shift. Or maybe they try the blame game. They mess up, but somehow it becomes your fault. Again, before you might have taken it on, tried to explain your intentions, tried to clear your name. Now, you see it for what it is. You don't argue. You don't defend. You simply state your boundary, or you walk away altogether, not with bitterness, with clarity. And they don't know what to do with that, because the narcissist wants chaos, and detachment is the absence of chaos. It's steady, still. It's a refusal to be pulled into the spiral. And here's the truth. Detachment isn't just about protecting yourself from the narcissist. It's about recentering your own nervous system. It's about choosing peace, even when provoked. It's about honoring your energy and deciding who gets access to it and who no longer does. You don't detach because you're weak. You detach because you're done. Done over explaining, done over functioning, done over giving, done bleeding for someone who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You detach because staying emotionally enmeshed with a narcissist is like standing in quicksand. No matter how hard you try, you just keep sinking. Detachment is the rope you throw yourself. The moment you stop struggling and start climbing. And I'll say this too, detachment doesn't mean you never feel triggered again. It doesn't mean you won't have moments of doubt or grief or even longing. That's human. But what detachment does give you is the ability to observe those emotions without being controlled by them. You can say, I see this feeling, I acknowledge it, but I won't act on it. And that's emotional maturity. That's where your power really shows up. Not in how loud you can be, but in how quiet you can stay when someone tries to drag you back into dysfunction. So if you're learning to detach, be patient with yourself. It's a process. It's unlearning years of conditioning. It's rewiring the way you respond to conflict, and it takes time. But every time you choose stillness over reaction, every time you choose clarity over chaos, every time you choose you, you win. And the narcissist, they don't know how to fight someone who's not fighting back, because detachment isn't surrender. It's strategy. And it's yours. There's something incredibly powerful about a person who knows where they end and where someone else begins. That's what boundaries are. They're not walls to keep people out. They're not punishment. They're clarity. They're protection. And when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, boundaries are not just helpful, they're essential. See, a narcissist doesn't respect boundaries. In fact, they resent them because boundaries get in the way of what they want most: control. Narcissists want access to your time, your energy, your emotions. They want to be able to shift blame, to poke at your insecurities, to reel you in and push you away on their terms. And as long as you allow that access without limits, they'll take full advantage. But the moment you set a boundary, the moment you say, this is where I draw the line, everything starts to shift. You're no longer bending to accommodate dysfunction. You're no longer available for chaos. You're choosing what gets your attention and what doesn't. And that is a blow to the narcissist's entire system. Now, here's the thing about boundaries. They're not for the other person. They're for you. They're not about changing someone else's behavior. They're about changing what you tolerate, what you engage with, what you allow to take up space in your life. So let's break that down. Maybe you've been in a relationship where every time you said no, it turned into a guilt trip. Maybe you were accused of being selfish, dramatic, cold. That's not unusual when dealing with a narcissist, because your no threatens their control. Your limits feel like rejection to someone who feels entitled to unlimited access. And when you don't give in, when you hold the line, They feel it. They might push back harder, test your limits, say things like, you used to care what happened to you. They'll paint your boundaries as betrayal. But they're wrong, because what really happened is you stopped negotiating your self-worth. You stopped allowing your kindness to be used as a doorway to abuse. You started choosing self-respect over emotional chaos. And here's the truth that a lot of people miss. A narcissist isn't destroyed by confrontation. They expect that. They're prepared for it. What truly destabilizes them is the calm, consistent enforcement of a boundary. No yelling, no drama, just a quiet, firm, this doesn't work for me. I'm not available for this kind of interaction. If you speak to me that way again, I'm leaving the conversation. That's it. That's the blow. Because I don't know what to do with someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and you're not doing it to hurt them. You're doing it to heal yourself. Let me be very clear here. Boundaries are an act of self-love. And for the empath, that's often the final, most difficult piece of the puzzle, because you're used to caring for others, sometimes to the point of abandoning yourself. But boundaries are how you break that pattern. They're how you teach people how to treat you. And when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're not just teaching them, you're reminding yourself of your worth. So maybe your boundary looks like refusing to engage when they start gaslighting you. You don't argue, you don't explain, you just say, this isn't productive, and walk away. Or maybe your boundary is protecting your schedule. You no longer rearrange your whole day to meet their last-minute demands. Maybe your boundary is emotional. You don't share the vulnerable parts of yourself with someone who has shown they'll weaponize it later. Whatever it is, once you set it, hold it. That consistency is everything. Because a boundary that wavers becomes a negotiation. And narcissists are master negotiators when it comes to undermining limits. They'll apologize just enough, show just enough remorse, say just the right words to get you to drop your guard. But that's why your boundary needs to be based on your values, not their reactions. And you'll know your boundary is working when they start reacting. The narcissist might try to guilt you. They might accuse you of being heartless. They might even suddenly become sweet, attentive, like the person you remember from the beginning. That's not change. That's strategy. And you don't need to get pulled back in. Because here's the difference. Before you were setting boundaries, hoping they would change. Now you're setting boundaries, knowing that you are changing. You're no longer waiting for respect. You're enforcing it. And let me say this too. Boundaries aren't just for your protection. They're also for your peace. Because once you start living with boundaries, you start to feel different, more grounded, less reactive. You stop being on edge, wondering what version of them is going to show up today. You stop second guessing every word you say, every decision you make. You start trusting yourself again. That's the part the narcissist can't reach, that internal sense of power, that unshakable knowledge that you deserve better. And you do. You don't need to shrink so someone else can feel big. You don't need to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to keep proving your goodness in a relationship built on shifting standards. You just need to stay clear, stay firm, stay grounded in your boundary. It might be hard at first, especially if you've spent years abandoning your own needs just to keep the peace. But the more you practice it, the stronger you get, and not in a rigid, hard-edged way, in a calm, steady, centered way. That's the strength that actually holds. And here's something else I want you to remember. Boundaries aren't the end of love. They're the beginning of real love. Love that doesn't cost your identity. Love that doesn't demand your silence. Love that doesn't punish you for having needs. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. So keep setting the boundary. Keep holding it. Even if your voice shakes. Even if your hands tremble. Even if it's uncomfortable. Because each time you do, you're sending a message, not just to the narcissist, but to yourself. I'm not available for manipulation anymore. I don't entertain guilt as a tactic. I'm allowed to take up space. And that's the moment the narcissist loses. Not because you destroyed them, but because you removed their access. Because you protected your peace. Because you finally chose you. There's something people rarely talk about when it comes to healing after dealing with a narcissist. The silence. Not the silence they use as a weapon. The kind they deploy to punish, control, manipulate. That's not silence. That's noise wrapped in quiet. No, I'm talking about real silence. The kind that isn't empty. The kind that restores you. That silence, that's where your healing lives. Because after all the chaos, the conflict, the emotional tug of war. Your nervous system craves stillness. Your heart, your mind, your soul, they all need room to breathe. And that kind of peace doesn't come from explaining more, arguing more, trying to prove your point one last time. It comes from stepping back. It comes from closing the door quietly and not slamming it either, just locking it from the inside. Not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop participating. See, the narcissist will always expect the final scene, the dramatic ending, the emotional confrontation. They're used to that, back and forth. They rely on it because as long as there's still conflict, there's still connection. That's why your silence isn't just healing, it's a boundary. It says, I don't owe you a reaction. I don't owe you access to my emotions. I don't owe you a single piece of me anymore. And that's not bitterness, that's closure. The kind you give yourself. A narcissist rarely gives you closure. They ghost, they gaslight, they spin the story to make themselves the victim. And if you wait on them to acknowledge the harm, you'll be waiting forever. That's why healing has to be an inside job. And often it starts with silence, not the silence of suppression. This isn't about stuffing your feelings down. This is about creating space, letting the noise die down, letting the lies unravel on their own, letting your body, your mind catch up to the truth you've been suppressing for too long. The truth that you were never too much. You were never impossible to love. You were just loving the wrong person with everything you had. And now you're choosing you. It doesn't happen all at once. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll second guess yourself. That's part of it. Healing isn't linear. It's layered. It's peeling back everything you believed you had to be just to survive that relationship. And you don't have to broadcast it to anyone. You don't need to make a grand announcement that you're healing. You just do it quietly, consistently. Maybe it's journaling instead of texting back. Maybe it's blocking them and not telling anyone. Maybe it's sitting in the discomfort instead of reaching out just to check on them. Those are wins. Those are shifts. And they happen in silence. The narcissist may still try to get a reaction. They may reach out through a text, through a mutual friend, through social media. It's not because they've changed. It's because they can feel the silence. They can feel your absence. And for someone who thrives on attention, that absence is loud. But you don't need to fill the space they left behind with noise. That space, that's sacred now. That's where you rebuild. Because here's what's wild. When you've lived in dysfunction long enough, peace feels unnatural at first. It feels foreign. You're waiting for the next jab, the next mood swing, the next accusation. Your body's still in defense mode, even though the war is over. So the silence, it's uncomfortable. But it's also where the recalibration starts. It's where you start noticing things, like how you don't feel anxious checking your phone anymore, or how your energy lasts longer throughout the day, or how your laugh comes easier, not because someone earned it, but because you did. That's what silence gives you it back. And the narcissist, they're still playing the same game, still looking for someone to hook, someone to draw back in, but you're not playing anymore. You've left the arena. You've turned off the spotlight. You've put down the script. Because you're not interested in winning the argument anymore. You're interested in healing the wound. And that healing doesn't require anyone else's permission. You can grieve without broadcasting it. You can let go without explaining it. You can move on without proving it. That's where the power is. Because when you choose silence, not to be passive, but to be intentional, you're saying, I no longer feed dysfunction with my energy. And here's the key. Silence doesn't mean isolation. You still reach out to safe people, to your support system, to a therapist, a coach, a journal, your faith. You don't heal alone, but you do heal away from the source of the damage. There's a difference. You start tuning into your own voice again, not the voice of fear, not the voice of guilt, not the voice that's been manipulated for so long. Your real voice. And it might be quiet at first. That's okay. Let it be quiet. Let it be still. Let it grow. Because in that silence, something sacred happens. You remember. You remember what it feels like to trust your instincts, to say no without guilt, to rest without fear, to exist without needing to explain yourself. That's the deepest healing. Not revenge, not exposure, not making sure they know how much they hurt you, but walking away so fully, so completely, that they can no longer access the parts of you they once fed on. And you don't need them to see it. You just need you to see it. And the more you sit in that silence, the more you realize it's not empty, it's full. Full of your resilience, full of your clarity, full of your peace. That's the final move. Not a dramatic exit, not a mic drop, not a battle won. Just you quietly healing, quietly reclaiming, quietly rebuilding a life where your peace is not up for negotiation. And when you do that, the narcissist no longer has a role in your story because you've stopped writing them into your future. And that right there, that's how a super empath destroys a narcissist. Not through revenge, not through rage, but through silence, through healing, through finally choosing yourself